What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Postgame Podcast. I'm your host, Cory Smith, editor of Pack Power. With me is Brian Geisinger. Brian, NC State, a 96-78 win over Wake Forest on the road, moving to 5-0 in ACC play on the road, which is just an absurd number. The first time NC State's done that, first time they had gone 4-0 on the road in ACC play since the 1973-74 team. The only way to exceed that would be going 7-0, which was more road ACC games than that team played in 73-74. Obviously, you're not going to match the number that they put up total, but NC State, again, just a blowout win here. Sweep the season series against Wake Forest, a team that's pretty down right now, but you needed to go on the road, go into a little bit of a sleepy environment. NC State comes out a little slow in the first 3 minutes, but red hot the rest of the way in the first half. 49 points in the first half. Almost matched that with 47 points in the second half. Again, just kind of streaky offense, but when it gets going, it gets red hot. Darrion Williams, 20 points, didn't play the last almost 12 minutes of the game. Paul McNeel picks up the pace there at the end of the game and finishes at 28 points. We talked a little bit about beforehand with Quadir Copeland, going to 10 assists in this game and being, the guy running the offense for NC State for most of this one. Just your thoughts on this win and what it means for them before we really jump into things, man.
Yeah, it feels like with the snow, the winter weather in the air here in the Carolinas and State getting a road win, like they should be looking for ice cream in Winston-Salem before hitting the road. And I would have recommended Zach's Frozen Yogurt on Jonestown Road as someone who hails from Winston. But that's from a different era. So no, State, explosive offensively today. This to me, in many ways, looked like sort of like the blueprint for them offensively, and it really highlighted why I think State's a pretty tough matchup for Wake. Even with Nate Calmese, out of the lineup, just State sort of like size and strength advantage at the playmaking positions with Quadir Copeland, Darrion Williams. In the different ways that can get those guys switches and get them going downhill and in the post. And that was enough to have, State's offense score 138 points per 100 possessions. That's the fourth time now in ACC play they've been above 125 points per 100 in a game. And this is in ACC competition, this was their second most efficient offense performance outside of the FSU game. So they're top 25 nationally in offensive efficiency. They're top 20 in effective shooting. They're top 10 in three-point percentage. They shot a real healthy number from deep today, 57%. Look, here's the deal. If you only turn the ball over on 11, 12% of your possessions and you make 57% of your threes, you're going to put up a big offensive number. And you're going to likely win the ball game. That's just how it goes. And for me, this game really had a lot to do with you can sort of see the competing shot quality. Thinking of how State could just sort of dictate the matchups, get to the spots on the floor, and then kick out every time they wanted to get a certain shot, and they assist on 58% of their field goals today. Versus what Wake had to do, which was Juke Harris plays all 40 minutes of this game, and he was having to just throw in crazy shots to keep Wake viable in this game, and they did, they, for 80% of the game or whatever, Wake, sort of, especially in the second half, they gave State a little bit of adversity. So I think State continued to press the right buttons. They leaned on some of their structural advantages that they had in this game. A bunch of guys gave them big performances, including Terrence Arseno, who played 25 minutes in this game, which I don't know if that's a season high for him, but it's not. FSU, he played 28, but that's the second most for him in a game this season, and he played well. Cory, we've talked about it. Maybe we can get into it a little bit more, but just Arceneaux does a lot for them from a lineup perspective because he can play different positions. He can play with Darrion Williams. He can platoon with Darrion at the 4. And so he just gives them a different look on that side of the court, especially on the defensive side. So good win against, I know Wake's in the middle of a tough season here, man. They've 2-7 in the league. They've lost 4 straight.
Starting point guard,
No Calmese. Losing at Pitt's tough. I saw them in person a week ago, last Saturday, when they played Duke and they just got blown off the floor in that game. Duke Harris played really well once again. But they're in a tough stretch. It's not like I think this is a bad team. I mean, they're top 80 in Ken Palm. So getting a win like that on the road is a solid pickup. And again, I thought State's offense looked like a top 20, top 25 unit today. So good showing from them.
Yeah, I was going to say it really feels like their schedule is kind of flipped in ACC play compared to what NC State has had, which, look, obviously, NC State's had some favorable games early on, some weaker opponents on the road. I mean, the Clemson win is still massive for what they've done on the road, but, a couple games over easier opponents on the road, you've had to win them, though, whereas, Wake Forest has faced a lot of tough opponents. NC State is one of those tough opponents. So, the fact that NC State was able to sweep this series was a big one, regardless of where Wake is. But before we get things started, I want to remind our listeners, as always, visit our iTunes, Google Play Store, Spotify, YouTube, everywhere that you get the podcast. Give us a rating. Let people know that you enjoy the podcast and help get the word out there to the rest of Wolfpack Nation. We do have a new YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, Pack Power 247 YouTube channel. So do make sure that you check that out. Hit like, subscribe, hit get notifications so you can jump on with us each and every time we do one of these. And also make sure to check out all of Pack Power's coverage throughout the rest of basketball and into football season. Spring camp is right around the corner for NC State football starting in March, right once, basketball gets, into the heat of things in March as well. So do head over to packpower.com to find out more about becoming a premium subscriber. You can get 50% off, I believe, still right now is still running, or you can get 2 months for $1 that you can check us out. That's the easier option, the $1 option there. So do make sure you check us out over the next 2 months. Gets all the access to basketball, football, into baseball season, everything along those lines. So make sure you check that out. Let's start with the obvious one here, and that's, for NC State, Paul McNeil, his play in this game, for whatever reason, the games against Wake Forest, he just comes out on fire. And I say for whatever reason, I think it's mostly, knowing, hey, going into Wake Forest games, I've got to hit threes. Like, we know they're going to drop coverage. We know that they're going to, that defense they're going to play. They have shorter guards, as you mentioned, that he's going to try to play into. He's 6'6" guard. So he has an option to, as Will Wade said earlier this week, and I want to write a little bit more about it. I'm planning on it this week. Just the neon green light that he gives Paul McNeil. Like, he was talking about the fact that Paul McNeil is shooting above 41% from 3 points range this season, and he's like, yeah, he needs to take more. Like, he's taking 105. He needs to take more. We want him to take as many as he can shoot because as long as they're good threes. But man, 36 minutes for him today. Finishes 6 of 8 from 3-point range. That's just otherworldly numbers for him. 6'6" or 6'4" from the free throw line as well to finish with 28 points. Just your thoughts on his game and how much he kind of changed the outlook for NC State early and late in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of thoughts about Paul. 28 points on 14 shots today. No turnovers. He's number 1 nationally in qualified players in turnover rate, just 2.5% turnover rate. Hasn't had a turnover in the year 2026 yet. Hasn't had a turnover since the Mississippi, the Ole Miss game, which is crazy. And he only had 1 in that game. I mean, he's really, as we've discussed, like, he gets the occasional sort of like second side or in the flow of the offense, pick and roll. But for the most part, he's in, to me, sometimes it looks like this sort of like narrow role because it's like, it's real it's real heavy on the catch and shoot. But you think of all the different ways State uses him, and he's such an important screener. He, once again in this game, got Lubin a finish at the rim off of a back screen. I talked at the top about the sort of like his usage in the guard pick and roll and how that helped dictate a lot of the good half court offense that State got in this game. And so even if, yes, the vast majority of his shots are going to be threes and they're going to be threes off the catch, His movement, shooting off of screens and relocating is excellent. He's one of the best in the country at doing that. They used him as a screener on and off the ball. And where State spaces him, I've written about this, I've talked about this season, it's very intentional. Like, you're often going to see him spaced in that right side corner when Quadir Copeland's driving to his right, because the defender in that corner doesn't want to help off of ball, right? And then create a very open, easy kick out pass to the strong side corner for Copeland. So that opens up that widens the driving lane for Copeland to get downhill. He's one of the best in the conference at slashing and getting to the rim, and draws a ton of shooting fouls off too. And a lot of that is Paul's gravity. I've described him throughout the season as like the ceiling raiser for them offensively. To me, like the Darrion Williams post-up game, Quadir Copeland, in the pick and roll with Lubin, like that's the foundation, and that's a really sturdy floor for State's, and like a really like stable floor for the half-court offense. But when Paul's floating around like this, and he has games like even the game against Syracuse, it's like, he only scored 5 points in that game. He only made 1 3, but he plays 32 minutes. In the entire time he's on the court, Syracuse defense has to be aware of where he is, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the case every time. And when you have a player like that that's just running around, floating around, who can really shoot like that. I mean, go back 10, 12 years ago, what Scott Wood, what Ralston Turner were for those Mark Gottfried offenses. That's what Paul does for State now, with his ability to bend and warp defenses, with his ability to float around screens or set screens and pop out or slip screens. And I think one of the reasons why Wake really like lights up as a good opponent for him is sort of like twofold. And a lot of it has to do with the smaller guards of Wake Forest. One, he hit a 3 coming off of a screen in this game where Sebastian Akins is guarding him, and he comes off a down screen, catch and shoot 3. Like, he doesn't even see Sebastian Akins on that shot, right? Because Paul's got like a little bit of like a longer release, but 6'5", 6'6" with a high release point against the 6'1" guard, like that, he can snap that shot off anytime he wants coming off of a screen in rhythm, And on the flip side, when he screens for Quadir Copeland, let's say you've got Isaac Carr or Sebastian Akins are guarding Paul, he sets that screen. Copeland gets the switch against a smaller guard. He's going to post up. He's going to back down. He's going to attack. He's going to get into the paint. Wake help defenders are going to collapse, and then Copeland can spray it out. And you saw him. I mean, he hit Abel, Paul, Darrion Williams, Trey Holloman, all those guys got 3s off of like State attacking a switch. I'm going through the film now. I don't have the final numbers yet on just how many of those like guard screens they ran for Copeland, but I will likely by end of day today. And it was a huge, huge, huge piece of the offense. I think it's a big reason why Paul was able to get going. It's a big reason why Quadir was able to get going. And when those two guys are hot like that, it's going to, Lubin's going to get shots at the rim, right? You know what I mean? Because their defenses are going to bend, they're going to react, and that's going to create openings for him to roll to the rim. Quick kickouts to Copeland, driving lanes for Matt Abel. Like, everything from there expands. So huge game for Paul, but he does this, like, again, to me, it's like, yes, he can be like a little streaky because he takes these like high variance shots, like deep threes. But teams have to honor him and guard him no matter what. And that, plus his lack of turnovers and his screen setting, like that's consistent. He brings that every night. He also brings, some of the defensive rebounding too. So big game for Paul, obviously. And again, just insanely efficient. 28 points on 14 shots is in no turnovers that's super duper efficient. So I've said this comparison a few times now as well this season. But the Copeland McNeel duo, it does now. It's like it's on a much better team, so it feels like that. Yeah. It's emphasized, but it really has like Darrion Sebron, Terquavion Smith, 2021, 2022 season vibes, right? Like this like power guard who's going to get downhill, get into the paint, and then this just like incredible shooter that's from the state of North Carolina. floating around and looking to step into catch and shoot threes. And Paul's been exceptional in his role this season.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think part of the difference between those two is the fact that, first of all, the efficiency is significantly better. I mean, I love Darrion, but like he couldn't shoot from outside at all in that season in particular. I mean, he shot a little bit better once he got to the NBA and the G League and things along those lines from deep, and obviously shot really well at the Combine that year. But like his 3-point shooting for NC State was not good. Quadir Copeland is statistically the best 3-point shooter on NC State's team. Now, I over one today, so I'm sure that took a big dip, but he's shooting, I believe, over 45% still from three this season. So, again, he's not the volume shooter that you're getting in Darrion Williams or Paul McNeil or Trey Holloman even, but he is a guy that shoots the ball well so he's a little more believable there. So teams do have to come out defensively on him. And then if he drives on them, you have to play catch up because Quadir Copeland is such a good, such a fast, twitchy guard that drives in the lane. And kind of the depth of him going, getting to the basket too, I think is what has kind of changed things too for NC State, where he's not just driving, just around the free throw line and then trying to kick it out. He's driving down, waiting for that double team and then kicking it out. That's something that I felt like Darrion Williams didn't really do as well today. Obviously the fact that he did end up with 20 points and he shoots 7 of 12 from the field and 5 of 8. So the scoring there was huge for him. Just felt like the turnovers for him, 5 in this game. NC State finished with 8 overall. So he had over half of their turnovers in this one and only 1 assist on I believe that was just kind of the easy, pass inside to Van Allen Lubin. And that's what led to the 1 assist for him. But, again, going back to Quadir Copeland, the two of them have played off of each other a ton this season as far as the usage rate is concerned. And going back to a Darrion Williams 35% usage rate in this one, Quadir Copeland 31% usage rate. So you're getting, once they're on the court, you're getting a ton of usage out of them. Just felt like two different things here today. Quadir Copeland more of the distributor, and then Darrion Williams obviously the scoring threat that he was today. Once you see him get going early, it's like, all right, we just kind of let go and let God and just let him keep shooting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when they're just like, the first 2 threes he hit were from that right corner, and they're both off of kickouts from Copeland after he gets a switch against Sebastian Akins. Like we were just talking about this. And yeah, like you want him shooting that every time, a catch and shoot 3 from that spot of the court in rhythm. I think we've talked about this with Paul, with Darrion this season, but it's like it would be a problem if he wasn't taking those shots, right? Like you always want the ball going up, and because that's what they want. That's the exact kind of 3 you want. You're playing off of advantage. You got a mismatch. Quadir gets into the paint and then you spray out. And State's been really, really good at doing that this season. I'm going to double check this just to see like what percentage of threes. Yeah. So Paul's made 73s this season. 86% of those have been assisted, which is, pretty big number. Darrion Williams this season's made 48 threes. 88% of those have been assisted. Unsurprisingly, Copeland has been the lead assister on both of those guys in terms of their threes. So that's exactly what State wants. Like pressure the rim, get an advantage, and then kick out to a shooter. Like the NC State being top 10 nationally in 3-point percentage, like just a tad under 40% for the season. That's not done by accident, right? Yeah. Yes, you have to have good shooters on the roster, but even with good shooters, you have to have a good process in a way to create advantage so that you're able to generate those open catch and shoot looks that the defense is trying to take away. And Copeland is, I don't know if he's one of the best in the country, at sort of like being able to collapse defenses and kick out for shooters.
Yeah. I mean, again, we keep talking about all the starters here. I wanted to kind of mention too, we've talked about it a couple times, the fact that hey, Trey Holloman, maybe he's a guy that should go to the bench, and maybe you put in a Terrence Arseno or a Matt Abel. I still kind of feel that way. It still feels like, Terrence Arseno or Matt Abel have kind of, done what they needed to do to get themselves in that position. Obviously, not a great 3-point shooting game from Matt Abel today, 1 of 4 overall. But you do get 7 points from him. He finishes 2 of 6 overall.
Mhm.
Terrence Arseno 4 of 6 in this game, and those are good numbers. But Trey Holloman, to me, outside of, we were talking about it beforehand, like outside of one bad 3 early on in the game, felt like both of his shots were in rhythm. 4 of 8 overall from the field, 11 points, didn't get to the free throw line at all. Finished with 3 assists. They did kind of put the ball in his hands a little bit there when you take Darrion Williams and Quadir Copeland off the court. But this was a good game from him, and you haven't had many of those since he came back from the injury over the last few weeks.
It was nice to see him sort of like find his shot, find his spots. I mean, they've got him in he's running less pick and roll this season. He's in much more of this sort of like, off-ball mover, secondary creator role. I noted it during the game, but there was a small stretch sort of like midway through the second half. This is also when Wake sort of like made a run. No Copeland, no Williams. And so Holloman for a second is sort of like in there as like the primary creator, but those minutes are not going to be super great for those are at this point in the season against ACC competition. I think they're going to struggle create. It's not like you can't, like Trey Holloman, Van Allen Lubin, empty corner pick and roll has been a really good play type for State this season. Like Trey is an experienced pick and roll creator. Like he can do it. But he doesn't really like pressure or bend the defense in the way that Copeland does. He's not like he's more in sort of like come off the ball screen, like look for a mid-range jumper or like try to hit the roller, go to the rim. And that's not even like bad offense, especially if you're playing with Matt Abel, Paul McNeil, Van Allen Lubin. Like those lineups should be like viable offensively, but they don't really have the way. I think they don't have anyone at that. It's harder for them to create half-court advantages because they don't have a ball handler that's like elite at getting into the paint, like Copeland, or someone like Copeland or Williams that's sort of like elite at creating double teams and or attacking a switch, And in fact, on the other end of the court, Holloman's the guy that teams are going to try to get a switch on it and go after, defensively. The lineup with Holloman, McNeil, Copeland, Williams, Lubin, like that was their original starting lineup. It's what they've gotten back to. That lineup's been really good for them this season. These numbers are not updated with the Wake Forest games yet, though, if anything, my guess would be that the lineup numbers with this group are going to be even better for this season after today. But coming into this Saturday, that group, Holloman, Williams, Copeland, McNeil, Williams, Lubin, had played 166 minutes. They were plus 73 in those minutes, which is in the 99th percentile for lineups nationally, plus 26 points per 100 possessions, scoring 131 points per 100 possessions. Again, I think all of these numbers are excellent, and they're about to go up after today. So they've really hit on something. It's why I feel very good about where the lineups and they just kind of need to stay healthy because the lineups and rotations are in a very good spot. I think there was a chance that Matt Abel could have maybe taken that role and you would have sort of found maybe you could have staggered more minutes between Holloman and Copeland. But I think Holloman, credit to him, I mean, to an extent, he seems to be willing to sort of slide into this lower usage role and just excel in that. And then when Quadir's not on the court, handle the ball a little bit more. And if he's willing to do that, then his shooting is pretty crucial for them. There are going to be certain matchups though where I think Abel's his ability to slash, his size are going to be crucial. So they're going to mix and match with those guys. And I mean, who knows if Allen Breed ever gets back in the rotation? But for now, Trey has really solidified his place as sort of this. I guess it's more of a combo guard, than he is really sort of a de facto number 2 point.
Yeah, and it's been asked, where's Breed been at? But it seems like we've been playing better without him. Yeah, I mean, I would argue with that a little bit. I think, I don't know that they've necessarily been playing better without him. I think it's just been the fact that if you're going to put Trey Holloman on the court as much as you have, and you have, not to say he's an undersized guard, but he's just kind of, he's not a 6'4" or 6'5" guard like most of the others that you have in this lineup. You're gonna have to balance that. Like if you're going to put him out there more, then it's, Allen Breed is going to have to come out a little bit more. Now, I've been a little surprised, and, that's something that, Will Wade talked about on Thursday night. We had the full transcript over on our over on Pack Power 247, talking about, the fact that he's kind of, been moved out of the rotation a little bit just because of the fact that, they've been winning. They've stuck with what's working. They're 4-0 since he's moved out of the lineup. Now, that's not to say that they've been a better team with him out of the lineup. The loss to Georgia Tech was frustrating, but that wasn't Allen Breed's fault. Like, really he's been a stabilizing force at times when they've needed him. But Trey Holloman, getting what you're getting from him, I think he's been, better. And I think at the same time, what you can get at times, not to say that you're getting, 15 to 20 points from every single time, but he's had 20-point games for NC State this year. He's had big games for them. Yeah. So that you can eventually get that offensive explosion every once in a while. I wanted to kind of bring this back to, we talked about it a little bit, but like the still kind of discussion about, Terrence Arseno and Matt Abel, the two of them combined 16 points a day. Matt Abel not a great shooting day, 2 of 6, but goes 2 of 3 from the line and did hit that 1 3-pointer. Terrence Arseno, 1 corner 3 in this game, and he knocks it down, 4 of 6 shooting from him overall. But again, we've seen him be just really, really good. I'm not going to say elite, but really, really good on the defensive end of the floor. And as Baltazar Wolf here said, Arc is a weapon. Will Wade talked about it afterwards. Like we talked about it a ton about, Matt Abel, what you get from him is probably better or more consistent offensively than what you get from Terrence Arseno. But he said the reason why Terrence Arseno was on the court a lot in the second half and 25 points in this game as a whole is he was the only guy that could stop Juke Harris. Like when he was on the court, Juke was at least, having to work a little bit to score. Your thoughts on kind of like the balance here of, all right, Trey Holloman's still in the starting lineup, but, how do you kind of balance, like, all right, which guy should be getting more minutes? Is it more of just kind of a matchup per game, or is it, hey, Trey Holloman should be the guy, or Matt Abel being the guy, or Terrence Arseno being the guy?
Again, like I said, I think I have a couple thoughts here, but for one, I really like where they've settled. Like the starters that they use today, like that lineup is crushing the seasons. Like it's their best like offensive lineup, I would say. Look, there's gonna be certain matchups where a guy like Arceneaux is gonna be, a better fit for you. With the core 4 is Copeland, McNeil, Williams, Lubin. Obviously, if you have Arceneaux in there, you're going to be a little bit more switchy. You've got more size. You've got sort of like a traditional like wing. I don't know if he's quite like a wing stopper, but he is like a plus wing defender for, in the ACC ranks. I give Terrence Arseno a ton of credit. Like, think about how much has changed in the last month for him. They play Wake Forest on New Year's Eve in Raleigh, and it's his second straight, DNCP.
Yeah.
And following the last game before the winter break against Ole Miss, where he doesn't play in that game either. And really, like, I remember doing a post-game pod with you after the UVA game where like he was just sort of like randomly like as Will Wade was sort of just like throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick, and what was a pretty dismal performance for the Pack that afternoon. Like, they knocked the dust off Terrance and threw him back in there. And since then, like since that game, I mean, there are a few different ways if you want to put it. Like, one, he's played great basketball. Two, he's just been one of the better reserves in the ACC in conference play. Like, period, point blank. Like, he doesn't do a ton offensively. They don't ask him to do a lot. He's at 12.5% usage for the season. Just under 11% usage in ACC play. Those are like microscopic numbers, you know what I mean? And he hasn't taken a free throw since the FSU game. So it's like, he's not really, he slashed a little bit today, which was kind of exciting to see, where he kind of like put the ball on the floor and got downhill. And to me, that looked like 2023 Terrence Arseno, before the initial Achilles tear, which is always is exciting. But to me, this looked like what the role that what Arceneaux's been doing now for State the last month. To me, that's what he was for Houston last season. Come off the bench, guard different positions, be a secondary creator for you some nights, be a spacer and corner crasher for you other nights. I've mentioned this a few times recently, but Arceneaux himself isn't this like elite offensive rebounder. He's, right at 7 or just under 7% offensive rebound rate for the year. But when he comes in, when he enters the game, NC State's team offensive rebound rate jumps by about 4 or 5% percentage points. And you can see him a lot when he's like spaced up in the corner. He often is going to crash from the corner. Yeah. And I think
State having he's at least tipping it out for somebody else.
And State having a guy like that, like they just like basically like mid-season, and I don't think it's an accident. Like they added like a good defender, a guy who could be a corner crasher for them, and just like what he does for them. One of the reasons why he's such a nice like bench piece is because like you can scale the lineup in any direction around him. Like he can play next to Darrion Williams, and you can have like a bigger lineup out on the court, or he can be the backup for Darrion Williams, and when he needs to get a blow, then you lose an offensive playmaker, but Arceneaux can give you a little bit of creation, and he gives you some defense, and he gives you some rebounding, and so you just keep it humming from there.
Every once in a while, he'll have a game like he did today. I mean, you saw it against what was it, FSU, where he went off. He had a couple 3-pointers in that game, and today
Boston College too. He played well in that game as well. So it's like he's plenty capable of it. I mean, I feel like sometimes I sound foolish saying this, but like I can remember watching Arceneaux his freshman season at Houston, and he was like sort of like a bit player for what was an incredible Houston team that season that had Jarris Walker and Jamal Shedd and Marcus Sasser and Jawan Roberts and Tremont Mark. And like, so Arceneaux didn't play a ton next to those guys, but if you watched him that season, it was like, oh my God, this 6'6" wing who can float athletically. Like he looked like he was going to be the next like star wing at Houston, and like be a guy that was going to be, in NBA rotations not too long after that. His sophomore season, he tears his ACL, and since then he's just been. The thought I had with him recently was like, he missed. I think it was the UNCG game early this season, 2.5 months ago, and it was sort of like wasn't it like Achilles soreness, if I'm not mistaken. And so part of me is just thinking like, look, one of the reasons he may have gotten off to such of a slow start was because like he literally like wasn't 100%. And then the confidence issues come into play. It's a new situation for the first time. But now like they've really hit on something with him. He's been a huge piece for them. And just like, to me, like he's totally additive. Like he doesn't turn the ball over, which is huge for them. That's been a big piece of State's offense this season. They're top 12 nationally in turnover rate, less than 14%. He can make some shots. And he's starting to get, like, I think a little bit more confidence to drive. And I don't expect him to ever, like, hijack the offense or anything like that. But it's just like if he sees a lane or a gap, like, he should take it. And at 6'6" with athleticism and some mid-range touch, like, yeah, it's good to see him be aggressive. I'm really happy for him. To me, it's sort of like flying under the radar as, like, kind of like one of the better, like, mid-season player development type success stories that's happening in if not the country, then at least the ACC.
Yeah, I mean, and again, kind of going back to that too, like, the fact that you get when you get the offense from him, it's almost like, all right, keep him out there on the court as much as you can, because you know what you're going to get from him defensively consistently. You can get him to guard 1 through 4. I mean, not typically going to probably put him on 5s, but
he's going to switch on the 5. Exactly. And like you can live with him doing that too. Maybe not every, you wouldn't want him to guard like a DJ Burns type, but could he switch on Malik Brown from Duke? Yeah, he could do that. You know what I mean? Like he can definitely handle some of those matchups too. And Wake doesn't really have like a great, Blue, Schweiger, those are like okay, ACC front court pieces, but like, yeah, you got no issue with having him switch onto those guys when the time calls for it.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to point out too, I'm interested to see what it looks like tomorrow when Evan Mia updates his rankings. But I wrote about it earlier this week, the fact that NC State has 3 of the top 100 players in the country, according to Evan Mia's rankings, and that's, with Paul McNeil. I believe Paul McNeil was at 69 overall, and then you had Quadir Copeland inside the top 40 overall, and then Darrion Williams at 87, I believe. I'm interested to see where all those guys, because all of them had good games today. Quadir Copeland, not a great scoring game from him overall, but 10 assists in this game. He affected the offense in a massive way. Paul McNeil right now, when it comes to guards in the ACC, the only players that are above him right now, Boopy Miller of SMU, who they'll face later this week, and then Chance Mallory and Ryan Conwell. So, he's the best offensive guard in NC State's roster right now at 5.40 as far as his offensive player rankings. And then looking at where he's going to be going in the future, he's got a still tremendous upside. As we've heard Will Wade say, his light is not only green but neon green. He said the last player that he gave that to was Cam Thomas when he was at LSU. So,
it's very tempting to find the tweet that I put out this spring being like, I think it was after Paul said he was going to come back for his sophomore season at State. I think I sort of had we're going to see him in the Cam Thomas role this season. It's not entirely Cam Thomas handled the ball a ton for that team and ran a lot of pick and roll and in ways that but it is, in some ways there are some similar, those are very offensively minded, talented, young, 2-guard prospects. But again, Thomas on that team, he handled the ball a lot with Javonte Smart and Trendon Watford too. But it's kind of, I can think of that. That was the 2021 LSU team. They used Javonte Smart in ways that they use Copeland now as sort of this big, driving guard, and Watford is used, Darrion Williams is used in ways that Watford was used as sort of playmaking, face up for. One other thing I did want to touch on, looking through the numbers a little bit more, it's interesting to see, we've talked a lot about the offense today, and we talked some about the defense, especially in regards to Arceneaux. I think I think these numbers, team-wide numbers, some of the credit is owed to Terrance. In ACC play, State is 3rd in defensive efficiency, which is a really, if they defend at that level, that's a really, really, encouraging number. They're number 1 in the ACC play in defensive steal rate. So they're getting steals on 13.5% of their defensive possessions, which is really, really good. They're forcing a lot of turnovers. The one thing I would say one other positive number too, in ACC play, opponents have assisted less than 42.7% of their field goals. In today, Wake assisted on 8 of their field goals, so 32%. That to me, and again, State has sort of mixed up some of the defenses a little bit, but for a team that wants to switch a lot, 1-4, 4-5, 1-5, which they did a lot today, and did a lot in the second half against Syracuse, that assist number is one to monitor, because when you're switching a lot, hopefully you're keeping the ball in front and you're forcing teams to go one-on-one, which is what Duke Harris did today, because they had to. So that's a really big number. If they can, and that was part of the blueprint with Kevin Keats too. Honestly, he was always trying to deflate those assist percentage numbers. The one thing I would say that is perhaps potentially a fly in the ointment is in ACC play, opponents are shooting just 64% from the free throw line against State, which is the best number, lowest number, or whatever in the conference. It's if that normalizes a little bit, then NC State's not doing anything to lower the opponent free throw percentage. So they're probably getting a little bit of shooting luck there. But so we'll have to see if that does continue. But there are plenty of other promising I think trend lines for them on that side of the court, including the fact that I think their transition defense since the Georgia Tech game hasn't been perfect, but has just been better. And the more they force teams to play against them in the half court, the more their switch can sort of dig in and force turnovers, the better they can be on that side of the court, which then looking at the sort of like flywheel of basketball, that's going to create easier looks for them on the other end in secondary, break, or transition offense.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the rest of the way for NC State, the upcoming game against SMU is going to be a big one for them. An SMU team that is 15-5 right now, 4-3 in ACC play. A tough game for them today against Louisville, but they've won 2 straight. Florida State and Wake Forest. You look at the teams they've beaten, and they haven't been great teams outside of beating UNC at the beginning of the season or the beginning of ACC play. They lost to Clemson, lost to Duke, lost to Virginia. We'll see what they do against Louisville. Mm-hmm. But outside of that, the wins have been against Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech. All 3 teams that rank outside of the top 50 in KenPom.
Big game for them today, though, too, against Louisville. That's with Michael Brown back. That's a big one to circle for them. Boopy Miller did also not play in the Duke game, which that was a pretty close contest. That they basically run offense through BJ Edwards, who's like a nice sort of like combo 2-guard for them. I was on hand for that game. They're interesting. They've got size. They've got guys they can throw it to in the post. And Jaden Toombs is also like a nice sort of like freshman 4-5 for them that gives them some scoring. So to me, it's going to be interesting because like they are outside of Miller, they have a lot of guys that are like similar size and strength, are all in that like 6'3" to 6'6", like 200 to 200, like 10, 15 pounds. So I don't know. State's going to, I'm sure, go at Miller. Like he'll have a target on his back, but they're going to be like less palatable matchups for them in terms of like tacking the switches because guys like BJ Edwards, Jason Pierre, Corey Washington, those are like better defenders. And I'm really curious to see how they do against Samet Igutoglo, who's not like exactly like my cup of tea, but is a like back to the basket, super physical guy that, I'm sure State's going to try to double team and because he's
going to be difficult when you don't have as much size like NC State does.
Yeah, he's 7'1", 7'2", 270 pounds, against Van Allen Lubin. To me, it feels like a game that like Moussa Sanye, Van Allen Lubin, those guys are going to have to really defend. Maybe you knock the dust off Scotty Ubube a little bit, for a few minutes and some stretches in that game. But really like NC State's like post doubles are really going to, assuming they're going to double the post at times in that game, are going to like really, really have to hit. On the same note, though, this is a guy that you can go after in pick and roll defense on the other side of the court. And so he's not the most mobile laterally. And so I'm sure State can try to find some ways to move him in space and go at him as well.
All right, last one here. Gary said, Brian, what's the play call that they run for McNeil where he comes up the lane to the top of the key and then passes out from the post? So that's the one where he's running is it the screen where he's screening up and then they end up pulling?
So there's one that they did. He had a 3. I'm guessing this is maybe the one that Gary's asking about. They ran this on 2 straight possessions late in the game, one of which got McNeil a 3. But it's like he sets a little like cross screen on the baseline for Van Allen Lubin. And then that brings Lubin to that side of the floor potentially for a post up touch. And then as soon as like Paul sets that screen, Paul then sprints up the middle of the lane off of a down screen from probably Darrion Williams would be my guess. It's sort of like the guy that's right there to set the screen. And so late in the game, they had this set up where Paul screened, Lubin got the ball in the post. After Paul screened for Lubin, he cut up the middle of the lane off of a down screen in that like middle third of the floor, and Lubin threw it out to him for a catch and shoot 3. And on the possession later, they went to the same action, but I think Copeland may have turned the ball over actually. That to me, like I refer to that with State as their through screen to screener action, and through I call it through just because like Copeland brings the ball up, he throws it to the right wing, and then he cuts through the lane to the left side of the court. While that's happening, you get the screener action with Paul in that sort of like middle third of the court as well, where Paul screens for Lubin, and then he comes off that middle pin down screen looking for a catch and shoot 3. It's really good action. Duke runs it a lot this season with where you'll see like Isaiah Evans will set the cross screen for Cam Boozer, and then he'll come up the floor off of a down screen from Pat Gongba or Malik Brown. It's like pretty old school offense, but it's really good stuff for when you have a shooter and a screener like McNeil, and he's so willing to screen and move without the ball. Obviously, they threw it to Lubin a few times in the block, and he scored in this game too. So it's nice that they can kind of feed him and give him those types of touches too. And I meant to say this earlier, just the last thing I wanted to because I did touch a little bit on State, like the offense taking care of the ball and not turning it over as much. Play types where it's like a post up for Williams, or it's sort of like a post up against a switch for Copeland, or a post up for Lubin, or pick and roll with Copeland. Like generally speaking, these are like sort of like lower turnover possession types. There's just like, especially when you have that post up too, because there's no help defense that's going to come from your blind side. You know what I mean? Like they've got that side of the floor cleared out. And if help does come from any side or from certain places, you can see it and you can kick it out to a cutter or a shooter. So I just think like State's found like a nice mix of plays that are going to allow them to like both like be like mindful of possession and take care of the ball, but also like get to the right spots on the floor, get to the paint, and generate catch and shoot threes. So it's a good blend that they have going at the moment. And all of those screen to screener plays with McNeil are money in the bank for them, because even if it doesn't get him open, it can create an open shot for someone else.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the more and more that you get guys like Terrence Arseno and Matt Abel in some of those actions too, you continue to have more guys that can.
Holloman too. Holloman, they use him occasionally in that stuff as well. And I mean, he's shooting a good ball this season. Trey's at 41% from deep on decent volume too. So he and Abel and Paul can really be honest. If Jerry Dang were playing, and I know he's redshirting, but like they would use him for that stuff as well too. I mean, I know he's sort of a different position type, but he profiles as sort of like one of those like roving movement shooters too.
Yeah. Last thing here, Jack asked. He said, "Cory, is there?" Jack asked, by the way, is what I meant to say. He said, "Cory, is there any word on State trying to bring in any more recruits from this class? Any guys reclassing up?" Yeah, everything I've heard, they're not aiming towards anybody in particular in 2026. There's a chance, and I've talked about it on our boards and in stories, that King Gibson, who's a top 10 recruit in the 2027 class, there's still a chance that he could reclass up, and NC State is definitely pursuing him heavily. If whether he stays in 2027 or moves up to 2026. So there is that option there. There's potentially some other guys too that they went after early on. If they ultimately don't like the spot that they ended up with, you could end up with a Matt Abel situation late where maybe they decommit late in the class or ask out of their NLI and NC State goes after them. So there are some options like that. But from what I'm told, you've got Cole Clower already on the roster. You're going to have Trayvon Carter-Givens coming in as kind of the defensive specialist when it comes to the big man for next year's class too. But everything else that I've heard so far has been, more so kind of leaning towards, all right, we're going to go after the transfer portal. We're going to try to add as many guys as we can through the transfer portal and build this class similar, along with, trying to bring back guys like Paul McNeil if he stays in college, trying to bring back, a guy like Matt Abel, Terrence Arseno, Moussa Sanye, all guys that came off the bench today and were productive. They're trying to keep them as kind of like the nucleus for next year's class too. So you can keep all those guys around along with some key, guys coming in the 2026 class and add, 5 or 6 players from the transfer portal. You've got another really strong class for next year too. So I think that'll just about wrap everything up though. Brian, anything else that you wanted to add, man, before we roll out of here?
Well, look, I was just saying, I heard TJ Warren was walking around downtown Raleigh this week, so maybe he's got 2 years of eligibility, so maybe you just bring TJ back. And
look, man, Terquavion Smith only played in a few NBA games. I texted somebody behind the scenes. I was like, hey, man, look, if there's literally guys that are able to be eligible now for, that have played in NBA games, not just, signed NBA contracts and never actually played, like, I'd reach out to Terquavion Smith and be like, man, you got some more minutes in you?
It's a ridiculous thing. I understand why it's happening. I don't necessarily love that it's happening. So I obviously, yeah, look, I mean, State's going to have to find more playmaking talent, sort of like primary creator types when guys like Copeland and Williams move on. But assuming they can bring like a lot of some of these names back that you're just referring to, like to add a guy like Cole Clower, if McNeil, Abel, like those types of shooters are sticking around, State has a chance to be a really good, 3-point shooting team next season too. But yeah, overall, just keeping an eye on this season. Big stretch of games ahead. Like it's about to get the month of February is going to be more difficult than January was for State.
Yeah.
I mean, SMU on the road, home to Virginia Tech. They're not a bad team. At Louisville, Miami's good. UNC's good. There's no maybe Notre Dame, Stanford, like maybe those are your like weakest opponents you're seeing. I mean, it's I guess just conference play in the ACC, but like they're done with the Boston Colleges, the Georgia Techs, the Florida States, the Pittsburghs of the world. So like the schedule is about to certainly take a turn here. So we're really going to see, I think, some of these improvements, some of these lineup changes. Like we're going to see sort of like how viable they are the next 5 weeks here.
Yes, sir. All right. Well, we'll talk much more about that. I'll also have some special guests on this week on Coffee with Cory. Looking forward to having a couple people on to talk about, everything when it comes to NC State. We'll have BG on, I'm sure in the future at one of these post-game podcasts. We'll get Miles on to talk some of this as well. So we'll discuss a lot when it comes to NC State basketball over the next few days, and we'll have plenty of stories as well. So do make sure that you head over to Pack Power 247 to check out all of our coverage. BG, I appreciate you for jumping on as always, man.
Yep. Take care, guys.
All right, guys. Once again, NC State comes away with a 96-78 win over Wake Forest on the road to move to 5-0 in ACC play, or ACC play on the road, 7-2 in ACC play overall. We will talk to you guys again soon.